Afternoon, Madam President, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak this afternoon on the bill before us, which is Senate Bill 1058, an act concerning compassionate or medical parole release by the Board of Pardons and Paroles, etc. I don't have any questions for the proponent, so I'll give the gentleman a break. I know he's been up for quite a while, and many questions have been asked and answered on this topic already. But this is really a simple bill. I know that we can get pretty deep into the weeds when discussing definitions of things like harm, etc. But I thought that it might be a good idea to have someone just stand up and kind of explain this bill in very simple terms. And I want to do that, and I also want to address my concern with it. The bill is a few pages long, but the meat of it appears in Section 7. And really what we're talking about is a change to a policy that's existed since 2004, which establishes a system by which we can offer compassionate or medical parole release to inmates of our prison system in Connecticut under certain circumstances. What's happening in this bill is a very significant change, however, and it should not be misunderstood or minimized in any way. The change that's happening is to remove some language and replace it with other language. The language that's being removed is the determining factor in who is eligible for this compassionate or medical release. And the current law says that we limit this only to folks who are physically incapable of presenting a danger to society. I just want that to sink in. We only allow compassionate or medical parole release to folks who are physically incapable of presenting a danger to society. That's what the current law is. What this bill proposes to do, Madam President, is to take that language out of our current law and replace it with a different standard. And I would say it's an incredibly different standard. It is substantial. The new standard is not someone physically incapable of presenting any danger to society, but rather someone who simply presents a significantly reduced risk of danger to society. Let that sink in for a moment. This is not a subtle change. This is a drastic and significant change in policy. There is a difference between no risk at all, which is the current standard. Someone who's physically incapable presents no risk or danger to society whatsoever, 0%, to someone who presents a significantly reduced risk. And what is significantly exactly? Would we say that a dessert would have significantly reduced calories if it had half the calories? We might. This is my main problem with this legislation, Madam President. I'm sympathetic to the intention of the bill before us, and I realize that folks that serve in our prison population are human beings, and they should be treated humanely. But this change, I believe, misses the entire point of why we have a system of incarceration. Of course, people can differ on what they believe the use and value of having a prison system is. And some folks might say that it is a place for rehabilitation and trying to make folks understand their crime and to change their ways so that they become ready to re-enter society as productive members. But let's not forget that another significant reason for why we have prisons is to protect the public. In fact, I would say that is the number one reason. It's not number two or number three after the items that I mentioned. It is the number one reason. We have prisons because we want to protect the public from people who end up in prison. I don't want to make any blanket statements about folks that serve prison sentences. But it's not easy to get into prison these days. The prison population in the state of Connecticut continues to drop. And conversations I have with my local law enforcement tell me that they are worried that we are prosecuting less and less crime all the time. And a sample of rap sheets, for lack of a better term, of folks that are serving time in prison will let you know that in general we are talking about folks that do in fact present a danger to society, and that's the reason why they are there. This bill before us makes me question what the other policies that are going through this legislature, what their interaction with those things might be. Folks listening might be familiar with proposed legislation called Clean Slate, or the policies that reduce the amount of background checks that are available to employers and landlords. So what's happening is we are simultaneously finding ways to let individuals out of the prison system, and we're also simultaneously making the public not only less safe because of that, but less aware at the same time. There's a provision in this bill, Madam President, that also provides that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, on line 115 in the bill, it says a compassionate parole release, to any inmate serving any sentence except the exceptions of a capital felony or murder with special circumstances, which I would note is not every murder. So some folks that have committed some pretty serious crimes are eligible. And the criteria is that if the panel finds circumstances exist which pose a higher risk of harm to such inmate should he or she remain confined. I would just note that nowhere in that sentence is any mention of the public safety mentioned. The only concern there is whether or not that inmate is facing a higher risk of harm. And I won't negate the importance of that. It's certainly important, and we should take it into consideration. But it should not be above the point of incarceration, as I already mentioned, which is to provide for public safety. This type of policy is not new, Madam President. We have had similar policies in this legislature before, and some of them have become law. And the most notable one is the Risk Reduction Credit Program. We've had unbelievably long debates, both in the Senate and the House, on that subject. And I've been on the radio dozens of times expressing my concerns over it, because folks that have followed that program know that there has been results, for lack of a better term, and there has been fallout. And by results and fallout, I mean victims. Victims of murder, of rape, of countless other crimes, because this body chose to negate the jury's decision, the judge's decision, and the sentences we put into statute in exchange for a policy that arbitrarily lets people out of prison early. It makes me wonder, Madam President, about the pressure that we're applying not only to this system, but also the three-member panel, because they will be the ones having to make decisions about who is eligible for this new, drastically and radically expanded compassionate release. I'm just going to ask one question that I want anyone who plans to support this legislation should ask themselves. And I want them to remind themselves that they are also asking the people that work in our prison system to measure this question when they have to make these decisions. And that is, can those who support this policy claim that this is not going to result in more victims? And the answer is clearly no. Something bad will happen somewhere because of this. We are changing from a policy of zero risk to substantially reduced risk. And I'm not comfortable with that, Madam President. And on top of that question, those folks should ask themselves, how much responsibility will they take for their vote today? Are they prepared to look in the eye of someone who is a victim of rape or the family members of someone who is murdered as a result of a policy that removed a protection, a valuable protection that we have in our current law? Thank you, Madam President.